The OTbase Service Graph Connector for ServiceNow allows you to import asset data from OTbase inventory into ServiceNow, where you can use the standard workflows and dashboard that come with the ServiceNow OT product extension. Let's take a look at the installation process and the dashboards and tables that come included. Once you've pulled the OTbase Service Graph Connector from the ServiceNow store, you'll be able to go through our simple guided setup. The guided setup is split into 3 sections. Each section has a few tasks to complete that'll ensure proper data retrieval from OTbase into ServiceNow. In the first section, you'll configure your connection and credentials, which you will then go on to test to see if the connection between OTbase and ServiceNow works correctly. Next, you'll configure the short code length, which we highly recommend because by default, ServiceNow's short code length is limited to 3 characters. And in OTbase, you'll more than likely be using longer location IDs and system IDs. So you want to go ahead and extend that short code length to something more suitable, like 20 characters or so. And finally, you get to configure when data is moved or pulled from OTbase into ServiceNow in this schedule import section. So any new devices or configuration change made in OTbase will also be shown in ServiceNow. This is where you configure how often and when ServiceNow pulls asset information from OTbase and stores it in the CMDB. So now we're in the industrial workspace. The vulnerable items by state chart displays the number of vulnerable items that are assigned to users for mitigation. So out of the 70,000 vulnerable items on the left, 1 of the vulnerable items were assigned to a user for mitigation. These vulnerable items are comparable to the vulnerability details in OTbase. We can also see that the 70,000 vulnerable items that we have not yet assigned is also reflected under the label of unaddressed vulnerable items. As we move further down, you can see your OT assets arranged by Purdue level. You have your OT assets broken down by type, which includes RTUs and PLCs. And finally, you can find easy to read pie charts that give you a summary of your OT assets by criticality and by manufacturer. On the left here, we can also check out the equipment model breakdown, and we can see things like the child entities. And if you want to go more in depth, you can view the hierarchy, which gives you a visual representation of how things come together. You can look at all of this in a list form and all of the relevant tables around the Service Graph Connector. You can also see your OT assets, your sites, equipment model, and vulnerable items that have been assigned. So that's a brief overview of the OTbase Service Graph Connector for ServiceNow. If you have any questions, please feel free to check out our documentation over at support.langner.com. For more information about OTbase, please check out our website and read our product description along with our product documentation.